Thanks a lot, Kathleen and Sugita-sensei. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this very important session about visibility of research outputs in repositories. We'll have 4 excellent speakers today. We'll start with Kristi Holmes from Northwestern University Clinical and Translational Sciences Institute in Chicago. And she will talk to us what's possible when repositories have good quality metadata. Then our next speaker, Paolo Manghi from OpenAIRE, will talk about OpenAIRE Graph and developing national open science monitors. And then we'll have a session with 2 speakers, Lautaro from La Referencia in Latin America and Omo Oaiya from Western Central African Research and Education Network, who will talk about persistent identifiers and global inclusiveness, how we can develop solutions that would address current inequities.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm so excited to be part of this session, and I'm looking forward to learning from, from the other presenters. This is such an important and exciting area of work, and I think that there are many opportunities for us to learn from one another. So this is an image of the building where I work, and there is a gold star right on top of my library so that you know what it looks like when we go to work every day. None of this is possible alone, so I want to take a few minutes to highlight some really wonderful people on our team. We have our own institutional repository called PRISM. I'll mention that in more detail here in a few moments. So the team responsible for that. We also have a clinical and translational science institute. So this is a research group that is charged with taking discovery, so what's happening in the laboratory, and moving it to clinical practice. So how do you take discoveries in the lab and improve human health? And so that's what we're charged with there, and the School of Medicine. I'm a collaborator with the Zenodo team at CERN. We work together both on the Zenodo project through a generalist repository ecosystem initiative grant funded by the National Institutes of Health, as well as my team are contributors to the Invenio RDM open source software community. And then finally, I want to highlight Arjun Krishnan. He's a professor at the University of Colorado in the United States. Arjun has been collaborating with us on computational approaches to metadata enrichment. So we have many good discussions about artificial intelligence and what's possible when we come together to leverage technology. Under support, you can see some of the projects that help to fund this work, and I'd be happy to answer any questions afterward. Also, before I start, I want to thank everyone at the conference. This has been such a wonderful experience. I've learned so much getting to hear from everyone here. I want to highlight everyone who's working behind the scenes. The team here at NII have made this an incredible conference. So thank you to NII and to all of our Japanese colleagues for welcoming us to your home. It's really been wonderful. So here's a little bit of context about the perspective that I bring to this conversation. So as I mentioned, I work in a library. I'm a library director, and we're very excited about our institutional repository and what's possible through it. The institutional repository is in the kind of pink-purple section. It's called PRISM. I'm also involved with our Artificial Intelligence Institute on campus. And then I mentioned NUCATS, which is the Clinical and Translational Science Institute. We have a couple of projects here, the GRAY or Generalist Repository Project, as well as the network of the National Library of Medicine. So I'm coming to you as an investigator, So I'm a scientist, I'm a library director, I'm an evaluator, I'm an administrator, and so all of these different roles are very important when we think about the opportunities available through institutional repositories. So I'm going to talk a little bit about metadata as infrastructure. You all know how important good quality metadata is. When we have good quality metadata, so that's both complete metadata as well as comprehensive metadata, we are able to explore so many opportunities through our repositories. And so when Kathleen asked me to speak to you today, it's such a big topic, right? What can we do with metadata? We can do everything. So I decided to focus my comments to a top 10 list, and hopefully this will make some sense, and I look forward to the conversation about it. So the first, number one, it enables seamless discovery across systems. So when we have high quality metadata, it allows for robust indexing, search, and filtering across repositories. It also allows for search and discovery across different disciplines, which is very important now in this time of interdisciplinary work, as well as in different platforms. So I think we're all using perhaps different platforms, but we want to be able to use each other's the wonderful research that's within our different repositories. And so all of that is possible when we have high quality metadata. Number two, we have enhanced reusability and interoperability. When we have good quality metadata, we can find all of the different things that we create. So we go beyond just those publications. We begin to look at all of the different research objects, the data sets, the software, the protocols, the visualizations, all of these wonderful things that we need in order to have high quality, reproducible science. And ensure those FAIR principles are really the foundation of what we're doing. So this is one of my favorite topics, number three. We're able to help facilitate accurate attribution and citation. So when I opened up my comments, I highlighted several members of my team, and it's important to recognize that there are opportunities for many different roles on a research project. However, many times those roles are not properly credited or even seen. And so when we have that high quality metadata, we're able to do a better job of attributing that work and also citing the work. And so when we are able to have meaningful citations to data sets or to other research objects, we're then able to begin to see assertions of where knowledge moves from one object to another. We begin to see knowledge change, as I was mentioning, from discovery, like the laboratory environment, to improving health through clinical practice or new discoveries that can be used in the hospital or in the community. This is all possible because we're integrating persistent identifiers. I know we'll have some conversations later in this session about persistent identifiers. Here are a few examples of persistent identifiers that can be used. It also allows us to be able to do more automated processes with respect to citations and tracking, which is really important for evaluation as well. And then finally, and this is an example that I'll talk about later in my presentations, it allows us to really elevate data as a first-class research object. So many of us, especially in libraries or in evaluation, you know that we're doing a lot of publication tracking, but this allows us to be able to track those data sets as a very high-level type of output. We also have number 4, which is enriched machine actionability. So when we have good metadata, it's possible for artificial intelligence and other automated tools to interpret and process data, and it's able to do so in an automated way. So it removes so much of the burden for the humans so that we're able to do more interesting and meaningful things with our time. We're able to have more operationalized processes. When we have that type of an environment or an ecosystem, it allows us to take our work to the next level. We're able to do things like meta-analyses, predictive modeling, and able to gather real-time insights from the work that we're doing. One great example of this that I think is incredibly important, and I would assume that many of us in this room will agree, is the ability to support more automated research data management workflows. So that really helps us decrease the burden for our investigators on campus. If they are filling out information in a field one time, and then that can move into all of the systems. So we don't want them filling out the same work, keying things in and creating typos along the way. So anything we can do that's automated, leveraging those persistent identifiers and automated workflows is really important. Okay, we're halfway there. Number 5, linked knowledge ecosystems. So metadata helps us connect research objects to other related works. And I suspect that we might hear about that in the next presentation, which I'm really excited about. So we're able to see the connectedness between the different research objects, building that web of linked open data that helps us understand context, meaning, and be able to understand how an idea or an experiment or knowledge moves through science. Okay, now we're at number 6, transparent research workflows. So when we understand the processes that go into research, we're able to see it. We're actually able then to be able to reproduce that work. So often, even if we have an understanding of a protocol, for example, we may not have all of the pieces of the puzzle to actually be able to reproduce that work. And so metadata helps us with that challenge. It helps us in better understanding a method. It helps us establish versioning, and if a particular version was used for a particular experiment. Anything that we can do in order to make a more transparent and trustworthy process helps us support reproducibility, research integrity, and I think it's an important way that we show accountability to the public. So many of us, myself included, do research that is paid for by taxpayers. It's paid for by our neighbors in our communities. And so if they are able to access and understand the work and to be able to look at it, I think that's an important part of ensuring that that work is transparent and trustworthy, and it helps to welcome people into that conversation about research, because research happens every day in every space. It's not just happening at a university, for example, behind closed doors. We want that to be for everyone. It's a public good. Okay, smarter impact tracking. When we have good quality metadata, we're again able to look at those data citations. We're able to look at usage metrics. I'm sure many of us are doing that type of thing in our repositories. And it also helps us understand reuse, which is important to be able to begin to understand the impact of a particular data set or other kind of research object. One thing I will mention, so one of the projects that I listed earlier in the talk, that Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative, we've started really digging in to to understand reuse. So it's easy to talk about good practices with data deposits and, of course, the metadata that's required for good data practices around research data management and sharing. But what does reuse look like? And so when you begin to have better metadata by those subsequent works, you're better able to make that connection between the original research object and then those that might come in a subsequent way that might cite or use work, prior work. Okay, personalized services. So this is one of those exciting areas that I think of when I think about what do I want my experience to look like. And this is number 8, by the way, number 8. So here we're looking at a more tailored experience with the repository and with different systems that interact with the repository. Things like dashboards or visualizations or being able to see information in a way so that it's immediately relevant to a particular type of role. So me, as a library director, I might have a different need for this information than another person who's a research scientist on campus. But we might all be interacting with the repository. So I think this is an exciting possibility when we think about tailoring what that user experience might look like. And again, just to reinforce, this is a good opportunity for enhancing public trust, to be able to create those spaces and experiences so that we're welcoming our neighbors into the great research that's happening in our institutions. Okay, we're almost there. Number 9. Scalable compliance and reporting. You knew I had to bring up compliance. There's a lot of compliance conversations happening around the world. And so just to highlight that high quality metadata helps us streamline compliance workflows. It helps us address some of the very specific actions that are required as part of data sharing mandates. It helps us to support ethical review workflows. It helps us be accountable to our funders, and it helps the funder understand what's happening with the research and be accountable to the federal government. So it really is a kind of a virtuous feed-forward cycle that we can help to support with high-quality metadata. And finally, this might be my favorite in terms of accelerating innovation. So how are we doing our work and doing amazing work, but also collaboration. I think our time together here over the last few days really reinforces how important collaboration is for everything we do. When we make our data and other outputs more visible, more understandable, and more actionable, we're able to collaborate in easier ways. We're able to connect with each other in more interesting and easier ways, and all of that is important. We live in a very small world. You think about everyone who's here today and who's accessing the conference materials. We're coming from all over the world. And so it's exciting to think that we can work together and how that's supported with discoverability in our systems. Okay, so now I have a couple of projects I just want to put on your radar so that you're aware of them. The first of these is called COMET. So COMET is the Collaborative Metadata Enrichment Task Force. So this is a community-driven collaborative activity to support open curation workflows. So all of the great curation that's happening by my team in the library, we should be able to make that openly available for others, right? And we want to take advantage of the great curation workflows that you're doing in your repositories and in your projects. And so I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to see this project. And you'll see at the bottom, there's a blog post where they talk about this, this project, and then the project website is at the top. So I encourage you to take a look. Really terrific people, really passionate about open collaborative workflows and high quality metadata. So I'm enjoying learning and sharing as part of the group, and I'm excited about the opportunities to enhance metadata quality for all of us. Okay, the second project that I want to highlight is something called Make Data Count. This is also a community initiative. All of the best initiatives are all community initiatives, as you know. So this is also another community initiative. And we're working to build tools and practices so that we can meaningfully assess how data sets are used. And as you know, we are often counting publications, right? But data sets are an important part of the puzzle. So we want to be able to create an ecosystem where we can elevate those data sets and recognize them as important and meaningful research outputs. So one part of that is a data citation corpus, which is a open, large-scale aggregate of data citations. You can see the link to resources at the bottom where you can learn more about the data citation corpus and find the link to access the information. So here we're looking at bringing together citations from lots of different groups and the associated metadata with those citations and resources. And it allows data article links that are identified through persistent identifier metadata, text mining, and other approaches. So there's a dashboard that's available. It allows us to be able to have meaningful insights into data usage. This is an analysis that we did from the library perspective to understand data sets on our campus and the University of Colorado campus. You can see the types of topical areas we're publishing in. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And then finally, looking again at that idea of moving research from basic science, from the laboratory, to improved health of people, we also did a small analysis where we started to look at how can we see information cited in clinical trials. So there we're seeing that science really getting into the clinical environment. So I have a QR code here, and if you'd like to look into the details of the slides, or if you have any questions at all, I'd be delighted to answer them either now or later when you go home, but please, feel free to reach out. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Kristi. Please write down your questions. We'll take them in the end of the session. And now I have a pleasure to invite my colleague, Paolo Manghi.
Just Paolo.
Just Paolo.
Hello, good morning. So I'm Paolo Manghi from OpenAIRE. I'm also a computer scientist. I echo Kristi's word about the kindness of the people here and the environment, which I really enjoyed. And helps a lot to learn and to share. So today I'll be talking about the OpenAIRE Graph and the role it has in providing open science monitoring mechanism tools for institutions. So first of all, a quick introduction. We always hear about OpenAIRE, what OpenAIRE is. I'll try to be short because it's a long story. It's about 20 years now. But it's referred to as the open scholarly communication infrastructures for Europe. So what we care about are scholarly communication workflows in open science. So how we share this science to make it effectively open and open science in practice, how we track it, how we monitor it, how we share it, access it, and so on. We do this by interacting with the communities. So we have an approach that is not top-down, but is participatory. We try always to take decisions together. And for that, we have built a network in Europe. So we have contact points in the countries in Europe, but we also have a lot of connections with other continents. As many of you already know, we had a chance to discuss alignment and global alignment in many occasions with many of you. And we provide also a number of services, to ICT, technological, digital services that are open to all. So our services are based on open source, open data, and produce open data. And then we also combine these two with training activities, because we also believe that open science, as Kazu said yesterday in one of his answers to the questions, is really a cultural matter that goes from the scientists to the policymakers. So now, what is the OpenAIRE Graph? Well, you can imagine it structurally as a graph, as a structured graph. So this means that we have several nodes of entities, metadata. We're talking about metadata, describing entities in the research domain. Here, it's a view from the moon, so you see that we deal with the concept of research products. We really care about a variety of research products. This is the first, let's say, added value of the graph. So we care about publications, but we also care about data and software. Okay, so that's very important. They're equally important, and we try to reach out to all of them. Then, of course, we have persons which can have different roles, from project so first investigators and project coordinator, or authors in several research products, as we call them. We care about projects also, so these are grants. We have funders and grants. As you can see, we have hundreds of funders and millions of grants. And that will be very important. I'll show you why later on. And then we have, of course, organizations, so institutions. And here, the other issue is how to collect them from several registries, from the funders, to duplicate them, and so on. So as you can see, these are the current numbers. We also have more than 80 million PDFs, which we are downloading when these are open access from repositories or via bilateral agreements with publishers. So we have agreements with Elsevier, with Springer, with Taylor Francis, with ACM, and with these publishers we actually exchange information. So they give us the PDFs, we do the mining and the AI, and we return the data to them. So as long as we can republish it for free and in the open for all. We are tracking today about 200 million publications, which include bibliotyping at a very specific level. So an article is an article, but we also have deliverables, we have reports, we have theses. So we make a clear distinctions between these objects thanks to the repositories, right? So as part of the chain. And data items and software, which is another very interesting topic, which would require another 20-minute presentation alone. Finding research software out there is not easy, and identify it as well. And as you can see, we have 6.5 billion relationships, which basically includes the whole open access publications out there, so from open citations to Crossref, plus the whole data site, citation index, plus the ones that we are inferring thanks to the PDFs mining, plus the ones that we collect from repositories, because some repositories are giving us this data. It's probably the largest citation index today because it includes citations between data and softwares, publication data, publication software. And it's, of course, available via API. So we are willing to include these further entities. These are under discussion under several research and working groups in Europe, so which are touching upon, of course, the global landscape, because we are discussing this in RDA, not only at the level of not only the European level. Services, tools, facilities, and instruments, these are becoming more and more relevant, and they're becoming a priority. And therefore, we'll take a look at them and see if there is a chance to build an infrastructure to collect and duplicate all those. Method and models are the next level. Okay, so we want to have them we want to actually pick and outline that these are specific kinds of products. At the moment, this is not the case. They often fall under software, as a generic piece of software. So virtuous life cycle, how we build the graph. So on the left, you have all the tools that we have to collect data, research data, research metadata from several sources. So we are collecting from what we call instrumental data sources, which we need, like Crossref, DataCite, ORCID, ROAR. So all the major registries need to be imported into the system, and that's a rule. But then we also have what we call the OpenAIRE guidelines compliant data sources. So the OpenAIRE guidelines are a set of instructions on how to share content from repositories that is based on DataCite, so that's the profile, and OAI PMH mainly. We also allow for other protocols like FTP and REST APIs of some kind, but these are the majority of the data sources. We're counting today more than 2,000 overall. Indirectly, it's like 140,000 because we collect also from aggregators. And we try to keep track of everything also in the case of aggregators. So we have this distinction between an object that we collected from and the object where it's hosted by. So we aggregate these objects, we enrich it by mining. As I mentioned before, these are examples of what we can produce, fields of science, sustainable development goals. This is more AI on the AI side. Once the graph is enriched, we deduplicate it, and that's another big issue because you have the same records coming, describing the same object, but coming from different repositories, different data sources, and so on. We need to bring them together and also to deduplicate the citations. That's another important thing. So we're never keeping 2 copies of the same citation if it comes from 2 copies of the same paper. We merge the 2. So you don't have at the end of the stream to do this yourself. We enrich it again. There are several techniques by inference. So we propagate content, for example, from one record to another, like ORCID identifiers and so on. We finalize it and we publish it out. And here we have our services that are using it to discover the data for communities, to monitor, to do all sorts of stuff, but also many third parties, including the Commission, Elsevier, he's using our data for free, and COAR, the European Commission, and many others like repositories. Repository platforms are using a lot of our APIs. Now, why is virtuous? Because all we do is based on reciprocal feedback. So we make sure that communities are not just using the data, but are part of the process, and in many ways. So they help us in the duplication process of organizations, for example, which is known to be very, very difficult to do. So we offer them the chance to further elaborate our automated outcome. We ask them to improve the crosswalks when we are talking about repositories. We find anomalies, we go back to the original repositories, and we try to find strategies to improve the metadata, and so on. So there are several things that we can do. We also return the data to the original repositories once it is enriched. So if we learn something about repository records, you should know you have a way to come to us and take your data back enriched with information. ORCID identifiers didn't have, open access, pointers to papers you didn't have, and so on. Now, this is what I said before. It's just a sort of preview, short preview of many of the data sources we are taking into account. As you see, we have many registries for data sources that we are counting on. We have several known sources that we consider instrumental to our construction. So building the skeleton, especially Crossref, DataCite, Software Heritage is with us, and so on, and all the registries. Plus the usual suspects, but mainly and most importantly, the repositories worldwide, at the level of the countries, the regions, and so on. So it's community governed, that's very important. So you should know that you can be part of the decisional process. So if you join OpenAIRE, you can be part of steering committees when we take decisions, also at the technical level, or visions. This is always decided together with the communities, the representatives, the ones to share. So the graph has to capture the will of the community. This is very important. So it's not me to decide, but it's also the reflection of the requirements of the community. Again, datasets, software, and projects are one of the main added value that we have, together with the fact that we collect from all repositories, also known DOI's object. For example, Lautaro is part of our net because of that. It's used a lot in Europe for several policy-making decisions, so let's say it's consolidated, and it provides open APIs. And one of these APIs is the citation index I mentioned before. We also give data to the data site corpus, the ones that we are inferring on our side. For example, citations between publications and data not in a data site, we provide to them. We have a good collaboration. And again, there's no much of a local processing needed because we try to address the deduplication problem at different levels, so data is out of the box ready. So why are we monitoring open science? Well, that's because it's evolving rapidly and globally and quickly, so mandates, funders, and so on, as well as scientists would like to know how they are affecting the whole open science conundrum. And that's not easy, so we need this data to be there, we need this data to be available. So we, scientists, policymakers, all stakeholders anyway, of science are looking at entities that go beyond the peer review articles. So peer review articles are still extremely important. They will probably always be in every form of peer review we are talking about, but they are just one of the many. Okay, so for example, we have a distinction now between dissemination actions and scientific actions, which is very important. So some of the CVs should actually highlight how they impact on the dissemination of science, which requires scientific experience, but it's a different target. We know data stewards, we know about working groups, these should be evaluated. So we evaluate impact, return of investments for the communities, and progress. So we need quantitative but also qualitative narratives, and that's very important. Why not just peer-reviewed publications? That's what I just said, but these are clear references to examples. We use institutional repositories, so content in there must be available and must be part of the monitoring. We are referring to the COAR curricula, as I just mentioned before, and monitor includes open science practices. How are we doing with open science? Examples are here. So we have, for example, more than 400 ORCID identifiers and profiles with 400,000 with research data in it. It's a good sign. So things are changing. It's like not 10, maybe 5, 6% of ORCID identifiers are already there. And maybe there's more. Numbers are increasing. Now, how do we do it? From the OpenAIRE Graph to a national monitor. This is just an example. How much time do I have?
7 more minutes.
Oh, plenty. So these are the 4 phases we go through typically. So when a country would like to monitor their open science trends, first of all, they need to identify their priorities. They can be both, one or many, right? So they should tell us if they want to measure, monitor open science, if they want to, for example, look into citations issues or connections between the objects. Some of them want to know how many links we have between data and publications. Some want to know how many software pieces they have. Then we go through a second phase where we select the indicators. So once you have understood what is your aim, we need to decide which are the indicators. And they can be open access trends, level of fairness. For example, we measure how many ORCID identifiers you have and so on, how many of your researchers are using them in their papers, etc. Collaborations, co-collaborations, co-funding. We, of course, span across different funders. We can tell you, for example, if your projects were co-funded by, your publications were co-funded by your country and the Commission, or maybe some funding in the States, is all possible. And then we use the Graph APIs to build custom dashboards, okay? So the custom dashboards are the issues here. So here we try to solve what Kristi said before. So depending on who is the user of the dashboard, we calibrate the dashboard to do something different. And then, finally, extremely important is the validation with national stakeholders. So the virtual cycle that I mentioned before. So we're not just offering data at the end of the stream. That's the most important thing, right? We're just including the community into the cleaning of the data. So we do a lot to clean it and harmonize it, but what we believe is that data should be good at the original site. The repositories are actually the place where the data should be, as Kristi was saying again, curated and nicely shaped. And this is unfortunately not the case in many, many scenarios. So first thing, identify national priorities. So we engage usually with ministries, funders, universities, national open science actors if they're very strong in a country. So these are the kind of users, allow me this term, we are interacting with. Together we define this country's strategic open science goals. Sometimes we start from their open science roadmap. Every open science roadmap requires numbers at the end of the year, and we try to find those numbers, okay? And this is a combination of things. As you will see, we do it with a graph, but also with other tools. We align with the EU and global frameworks, so we try to make sure that everything we do, also in terms of number, uses the right language and the right recommendations. And when we translate in the end the message or the intent that we found into monitorable questions. So we have a number of challenges and we try to provide indicators for the challenges. For example, for Ireland, we have a monitor for Ireland. They wanted to measure the open access performance of their institutions. So what we did was to deliver them tools to analyze the open science trends at the level of the university, at the level of the repositories, and also at the level of the researchers. So for each of them, you could find anything about Plan S, Diamond Access, whatever. I'll show you later, okay? For Greece, it was a different kind of thing, so they wanted all sorts of outcomes, so publications, data and software, analyze everything, and then priorities. So they wanted to measure the cost of open science. We also have these numbers, I forgot, so the open access APCs worldwide, and we also have, of course, the funding that has been invested, so the project funding. And the IOSCO Observatory instead blends policy themes. We mean here surveys and national and country trends, so numbers that have been collected manually with the data that we have in the graph to come up with narratives that make sense to the policymakers, but also to the general public. So the indicator themes, there are many, since we have different ways, we have different kind of entities and many ways to make them interact with each other. So you can see funding from the perspective of publications, from organizations, so you can combine these things the way you want. So the combination of these elements gives you different numbers and you can analyze how it goes, okay? So from the research output perspective, the open science perspective, as you see, so fairness, metadata quality, we can measure it. We can measure how complete the metadata is, how fitting to certain schema it is, and so on. Collaborations, impacts like citations, downloads. We also have the downloads, so the data, the counter of metrics downloads that we are taking from several infrastructures and ours. It's called usage counts, and so on. So thematic perspectives, etc. So then we use the graph and the APIs to build custom dashboards. That's another important thing. We use the OpenAIRE Graph APIs, but also we have the possibility to customize our mining. Okay, so if you are a community and you're looking for specific impact from your perspective, we can tailor our full text mining. And now we have, again, more than 80 million publications there. We're downloading 80,000 a day, so it's increasing. We can tailor it to find the links between the publications and your concept, so your community. That's the most important thing. So we can look at the graph from your perspective. And then we present the indicators by institutions, funders. We allow filtering and comparison, so the APIs are flexible from that perspective. And based on that, we build the dashboards. So this is the Irish Open Access Monitor. These are the 5 different perspectives that you can, oh yes, I forgot the research funding organizations. So in Ireland, they have 10 probably. So they want to look at it also from the research funder perspective. So each research funder is in OpenAIRE. We get the projects from them, we update them, and every round we run the mining to find the links between the publications and the projects. And then we propagate these links. That's the propagation phase I mentioned in the graph. So if we know that a publication is linked to a funding, to a project, then all the supplement material of this publication are also linked to it. So data, software, etc., become naturally part of the project. So we propagate this information. We do it at the national level, so globally, and then, of course, from the point of view of a university, a research performing organization, or institutional repositories. We have indicators view, research output views, and so on. So as you can see, these are ways or possibilities to visualize. You can also, of course, search into the content. You can see it from the point of view of individual institutions. This is the EOSC Observatory. It's a mixture of survey data that we have collected at the level of the country in Europe. EOSC is the European Open Science Cloud. And as you can see, this is a slightly different perspective. So we can see it from a perspective that is one of the policymaker in general. So open science by country, monitoring, trends, etc. And here are examples. So questions such as open access publications in Europe. This is a classic, you can get it, but also financial investments. EU countries with financial strategy on open access publications, so you can find that from surveys and so on. And see also how their mandates matches the reality, because we have the data to address that. Trends is an example, trends of access to publications. National policy and open access publications combined. This is the one I mentioned before. Financial investments in open access publications. This is open APCs plus some of the information we got from the country. This is another interesting one, total investment in the EOSC, so European Open Science Cloud, and open science with open access publications investments across the nations. So we combined, again, funding and ability to publish, thanks to the graph. The country perspective is similar, so we have a view that is similar to the one that we had for the Irish monitor, but is provided at the level of Europe, and is, say, more global. We don't get into the detail. That's something that we provided to Japan just as a test, so it's the open access monitor that we provided for Ireland, for Greece, and now ongoing for the Netherlands, and we also provided it to Japan. We can share a link if you want to take a look, and if Kazu allows me to do so, because okay, that these are the kind of numbers that you can find in there, as I mentioned before. Peer-reviewed publications in gold. And as you can see here, you have the access rights, FAIR, Plan S, APCs, cross-country, and academic impact. And this is the view that you can have for repositories, universities, or the country as a whole. This is, I think, the last slide. So it's very important to validate with stakeholders. And I'll stop to say so. It's really important to go back, co-design everything we do. So it's not just about data and transparency. It's really more about engagement, trust. And you build trust only by making sure that the community you're serving is happy with it. And they need to understand that this is not just only up to us, to those building this kind of graphs. We can do our best to fix the issues where they are, but if we have somebody like Kristi at the end of the source of the stream, we can interact and improve things. If there is nobody, right, collecting the data from a source that is ill somehow, doesn't help at all in the process of monitoring of science, especially if you want to keep it open and transparent for all. So these are the actions that we typically do, and this is what we've done with Ireland. This is probably taking too long, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Paolo. Please write down your questions to Paolo. And now I would like to invite Lautaro Matas from La Referencia. And we are going to discuss very important topic, how to make sure that persistent identifiers we've been talking about really work on the global level and are fair and inclusive. And Lautaro will also be joined by Omo Oaiya in a couple of minutes.
Sorry, I took that long way today. Hi, Omo. Hi, everyone. Well, good morning, and thank you for having me here. once again. Today, I want to bring again I did a small comment yesterday about the importance of the PIDs and the situation for Latin America, for Africa, and for other countries of the global south. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, me and Omo, we are going to talk about how and why we are doing this work with PIDs in our regions and the importance of this for us today. So, I want to start to making a point about the inequity challenge that we are facing in our regions about PIDs and why we are doing this work. So. The fact is that we have a limited access to the PID services in the Global South. That's because our institutions mainly doesn't have the funding to pay the membership or pay for having DOIs. Our main problem with PID is actually DOIs. We only 20% of our production in the repositories have DOIs. And it's the same if you go to the Latin America, also in the Diamond Access journals in Red Lake, for example, is the same proportion. So, and what this means for us is not only about interoperability or the ability to have a way to go to the digital object and preserve the link to the digital object, is also about access and presence in some of the graph, because Paolo pointed, OpenAIRE is one of the exceptions to this situation, because they don't use or need they use, but they don't need. You don't need to have a DOI to be present in the OpenAIRE Graph. But if you go to OpenALEX, and that is being used widely now to calculate metrics and indicators, if you don't have a DOI, you are not present in that collection. And so it's not only about the persistent identifier, but the effect of not having this. And this maybe is not a problem for universities or some of universities in Europe, and it is often for us hard to explain why we need this, or what is the situation in our region about this, because it's not perceived as a problem in some parts of the world. So, and still, everyone now that uses DOI is depending on the centralized infrastructure. So, you don't, or the community doesn't have the control of how the data is stored, where it's stored. We can ask where the data is stored, and if we will have access if some of these agencies runs out of the business. So it's important for us to address these problems in general, not only for our region, but for the global ecosystem, open science ecosystem. So we are proposing a more decentralized model for this. And why decentralized matters? Because, of course, we want to empower the institutions. The model that we are proposing is to share and to divide the cost of hosting these services and providing these services, not using fees or paying fees, which is again a problem for many institutions. I also want to remember that some countries like Cuba, for example, they can't have DOIs, because they can, even if they have the money, they can go to Crossref or the other side, because they are banned. So we want to empower the local institutions. The decentralization also reduce these financial barriers, because sometimes, at least in our region, it's easy to have a server or provide a resource to contribute to a network for decentralization than having dollars every year to pay for a membership or pay for every persistent identifier. And it's also about sovereignty, because in this way we can have the information in our ecosystem, no one controls directly the information who decides, and no one can say, okay, you need to pay now a fee to download a dump or everything. So decentralization is, we have the technology now and for a while now to do this. So, and of course increase the resilience and the sustainability of the solution, because in a distributed or decentralized system, even if part of the system falls, you will still have access to the service and the metadata preservation. And also it's about governance and transparent governance. So this kind of system, the decentralization is not only about the technology that you use, but also the governance layer that you build on top of a federated or decentralized service. So because of all this, we start to develop 2 years ago, start thinking and trying to resolve this problem with DARC. DARC is a decentralized blockchain, don't run out of the blockchain-based implementation of the ARC persistent identifier. I said don't run because when we first start this development and we said blockchain, a lot of people, especially in that moment, because it was in the moment that the blockchain, the crypto blockchain challengers were consuming a lot of GPU power, and we had big farms they have big farms of GPUs calculating, especially Bitcoin cryptography challenges. But this is not the case of the blockchain flavor that we are using. We are building on top of a different blockchain technology that doesn't require GPU or CPU effort or high computation to be part of the network, because we use another. I don't want to go more in deep of this, but we can discuss about that if you like, about the algorithm that we are using to use the network, and it's not CPU dependent. And to be part of this, you only need a very, very small memory and CPU server. So why ARC? When we start discussing what PID to use, our first call was, okay, we can implement a DOA agency in Latin America based on a decentralized technology. But we discovered that having a DOA agency, it has a cost itself. You need to pay only to be a DOA agency. At least that's what they say to us. And so we started to research more, and we discovered ARC. And the ARC is not only a good identifier in terms of that you can have, if you build your own infrastructure, you can provide ARCs, and we have a globally resolver and all the benefits that you can have with DOI. But also ARC by design is more adaptable to different situations, because, for example, with an ARC you can subdivide the identifier, and you can identify even a single row or image inside your article. So it's very interesting what you can do by using this feature of ARC. And you can be very creative and design a lot of services on top of this feature that it's hard to do this with DOIs. And we built this from the very start as a public good for our region and for other regions also. So this project is started in the Institute of Science and Technology Information in Brazil, the IBICT. My colleague Washington is not here today, but we were working together in this idea that came to us in a conference. And we started to discuss how to do this. And finally, we started to work together in this, and Referencia got the support of a lot of institutions around the world thanks to the SCOAS process. And I want to thank again to SCOAS for selecting us as essential infrastructure. So the core principles are this openness, the decentralization that I was commenting a moment ago, and the interoperability. We want to make DARC interoperable with DOI. We already have inside our implementation a way to interoperate with DOI. So now we have a working implementation of ARC working in Brazil that is working through the national aggregator service. So if you are a repository, if you are aggregated by eBict, by the national portal, and you subscribe to this agreement because you need to delegate to eBict the ability to go to ARC International and make the NAND prefix, that is like the DOI prefix, which is free. So you can have a DOA and ARC for every single record in your collection, and the aggregator makes this automatically and deliver. And now we are delivering that to the repositories. So it's a fast track for the legacy records, because, for example, in Brazil, there are 5 million, 6 million of records without identifiers. So in this way, we are rapidly deploying identifiers into, and it's faster than just giving a plugin that we would do that to every repository. But in this way, we are, in a few months, we have 400,000 identifiers deployed in the. And if you think in the cost of that that we are saving for the Brazilian state, because they are not paying, and the repositories are not paying a single dollar for these identifiers. So I don't want to go more in deep on the technical details, but the thing is that we have this network that is behind the service. So if some of the nodes, we have now 3 or 4 nodes working, but if for some reason 1 node or 2 nodes goes out of the business, the system is able to resolve the identifiers that we already have, but also mine new identifiers. And the blockchain structure ensures that all the information is synchronized all over the network in real time. And if a node falls and comes again to the network, it's synchronized and is again able to give service to the network. So we think that this model is sustainable for us because we want to grow and add countries to these networks in the next months of years. So this is the information about the pilot in Brazil. All the ARCs that we deliver, that we mined, are now being resolved by the global resolver. So if you put the ARC in the global ARC Alliance resolver, it just goes to realizing our infrastructure and resolves to the final, to the digital object. So what are our next steps? We want to establish new tech nodes in more countries. We are participating in some calls to get the funding to do this, because we need funding to make the expansion of the network. The maintenance of the networks is, once it's established, is not high. The cost is not high, but this first step requires external funding for doing this. And we want to, and we are already working in the research stage of this implementation, also to have the metadata stored in the decentralized way also. we want to preserve the metadata that we have in our aggregators in a decentralized way. Mainly because we want to give the same level of service that the agencies are doing now by linking the identifier with the metadata. And we want to do this in the decentralized ways also to ensure that even if our aggregator or even if the repository is not online, you can have the metadata. So if any service wants to have the metadata to calculate indicators or whatever, we want to preserve that, even not depending on our own infrastructure. So, of course, the next steps also include to deliver the plugins to make the institutions themselves to be able to mine their own identifiers. And this is in the context that this is something that we were discussing and working together with Omo, and he will comment on this moment. But from the very beginning of this ARC approach, we were discussing how to, even with different approach, resolve this problem for our region. And so we have a shared vision of this, the importance of this initiative of having persistent identifiers. So we were collaborating with Walkren and discussing in the context of COAR also, with even when John Kunz, one of the ARCs, the ARC original designer. So, and I want to bring my friend Omo here to discuss together or give you the floor to continue. For my part, my three important things in this talk is we need to promote these decentralized PID systems because they promote equity, and we want to foster the collaboration between regions. And I want to mention that all what the software and the code that we did in the ARC is available to everyone to use. Now we are in the starting phase, and we are start improving the code, but it's already there for everyone to use and test, if you like. So thank you.
So I decided not to use any slides because most of my presentation would have been exactly like Lautaro's. Now, the difference in Walkren is that we have a different implementation of ARC, not one using standard tools. As a matter of fact, we're using software that was developed originally by the Internet Archive, and then it was the Freak Museum expanded on it and kind of implemented all the specifications of the ARC protocol. So the arguments and the conversation is the same. So I didn't want to bore you with the slides, but I would like to have a conversation. See, because when I listened to Kristi's presentation, all the great things about where DOIs are being used, that, in my view, adds to the exclusion. So if we are starting to build systems that are dependent on a particular PID that excludes a large part of the world, then how's that open? How's that inclusive? And yesterday, I also heard that the Japanese colleagues have the same challenges. I think a number of presentations that were repeated, DOIs, the access to DOIs is a problem. It might not be entirely cost. I think as cost was mentioned. So how are we growing these open systems? And I thought maybe this session would be better if we asked ourselves questions, or if people had opinions, and we could share them and make it a bit more interactive. So, and if you don't, and same thing is happening too, I suppose, with OpenAIRE. if we're building systems that use the DOI, what happens with the, can we sort of have a mic around so that we can sort of engage? I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I would really appreciate it. Because when I think, I can give you a project I currently have. We have this network of agricultural institutions that we're trying to help build a data platform for. Of course, we want to make it fair. We want to make it, all kosher and sort of, the same, same sort of requirements that we all want. So it needs to be persistent data. We want persistent identifiers. But we're talking about 40 countries, 170 universities, and we have this whole notion of encouraging early career researchers to do the right thing. So we want them, for every data set that they put in there, we want it to have a PID. What is the option here? We're talking about discoverability with COAR. We say that these PIDs are necessary. How do we actually move forward? So I thought, there are lots of clever people in the room, people with a lot more experience than I have. Don't forget I'm NREN, so I'm just sort of new to this. What is the way forward? So I'm really looking for an interactive session. So Lautaro has set the stage with his presentation.
Yeah, and then maybe the speakers could just go up to the front.
Yes, if I could invite all the speakers to come up.
And then if people have questions for any of the speakers, they could pose them now. We don't have a super long amount of time until the break, but Omo, just to respond to you and Lautaro, I think this is such an important issue. Isabel and I were just talking about how this is not on the radar of the policymakers and the funders who are starting to require DOIs, and it's a real risk for our whole community. So I think it's a very important issue that COAR, as you know, feels very strongly about collectively, and we want to help to make sure that there is an inclusive ecosystem for everyone. My question is, how hard is it for a country, or for example, a country to spin up a kind of ARC ecosystem for themselves? Is it, are there 5 staff members that are needed to manage it through, so I just don't have a sense of what the requirements are around the infrastructure. So maybe Lautaro and Omo could.
So maybe I talk a little bit about the WACRAN implementation. So at the end of the day, any infrastructure is only as good as it's reliable. So yes, individual libraries can actually spin up ARC implementations. There are different implementations, and some libraries actually do that. But as WACRAN, as the regional research network, we thought, we would implement it as one of the services so that we could be certain the community could have services available all the time at very low cost. Now, the PIDs themselves don't cost any money, but running and managing them has a cost. And when we run that at the regional level, then that cost is negligible. Now, in terms of the actual resources, we have 2 full-time employees who manage the system at this point in time. I don't see that, just the basic service, that you need more than that in terms of just the PIDs. But of course, we want to build more services into that.
But what about the physical?
The physical infrastructure in terms of servers, negligible.
Yeah.
So their hands there's a hand there. I think she wanted to start, I think.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. About to complement your answer, the thing is that you can, as Omo said, you
can implement in a very cost-effective way and very easy way and monitor and resolver for ARC. Even if you have a OJS, it has a plugin that you can use, and even a single OJS can be a provider. The problem with that is the very fair solution, but the problem with that is you rely on only on the ability of the institution of maintaining that, which is not a cost problem, but it's a reliability problem. So that's why we start developing this technology behind, in order to share the effort, but also ensure that if any or many nodes falls or can't afford the servers or the personnel, so the persistence is still possible. But the way that we are also developing the ARC, we put a lot of effort in make the service very easy to deploy. And in our case, you don't need to be personal in your institution to maintain this, because it's like a virtual machine or the Docker image that you need to maintain the essential infrastructure behind this. And in the case of the personnel that you need to maintain the network, you need 1 or 2 FAT for entire network to maintain and develop and deploy the network. But it's not such a high cost.
Can I just say one last thing? Sorry, because I'm monopolizing, but like, we wouldn't want individual institutions necessarily to do that, because then you just end up with the problem of the lack of visibility. So like, I like the regional initiatives, so that, for example, you can communicate with OpenAlex and say, all of the Latin American documents can be indexed using this
exactly. That's
metadata that we have. Yeah.
And even at the end, in our case, we are relying more on national institutions or national research and education network to host this service, even because we don't even node a single node in every institution. You can have 4 or 5 at most nodes per country. If your country is big, but we are planning to have even 1 node per country to contribute to the network. So it's not the big deal. And again, the servers are not high-end servers.
Is it Maiko? Yeah. So I have a related question. I'm very excited by this, by the way. I'm really, really interested in seeing the ARC become the default for our communities. I used to work quite closely with the DOI system. I was on the IDF, the International DOI Foundation board, for a while. And the thing that I really learned there was that aside from all of the technical resilience and so on, the point of the DOI Foundation was that there was a guarantee that if one of the registration agencies went out of business or failed for some reason, then the others would take on the responsibility for resolving those DOIs. So there was a sort of a social business contract between the registration agencies. Now with the ARC system, we have potentially a similar arrangement starting to develop. It's not as formalized as it is with DOI, but we've heard today from 2 what I would call registration agencies or equivalent bodies. So my question is, how do you see this guarantee being enacted in the ARC space? Is there a role for the ARC Alliance to do this? Is that something which the ARC Alliance is interested in or equipped to do? Because I think it's an important thing. Right now, if one of your registration agencies just fails completely for some reason, who's going to take on that responsibility for minting new ARCs and resolving and so on?
So are you talking about ARCs that are already minted, or providing the service to that community?
All of them.
Sorry, because if they're already minted, then you're talking about resolution of the ARCs that exist, because they already exist. So that's not there's not a challenge there as far as I understand it. Now, in terms of if the ARCs exist, then it's about resolution. So there's a none.
Sorry, can I clarify that point? So there has to be a relationship between the resolver services for this to be true. It's possible to create a registration agency that resolves ARCs without having any relationship with any other ARC resolution system, yes?
You do know that, right now, as it is, N2T can even resolve DOIs.
Yeah, it can resolve DOIs because it has a relationship or knows about the DOI resolver.
And every NAN is also known by the ARC system.
But not the resolvers necessarily.
Well, Lautaro is a more technical person here, but the way I understood it and the way it's been working is there's a resolver, there's an N2T resolver that's run by the ARC Alliance, so to speak. NANs are issued by the same group, so that information is known. But I think Lautaro would actually shed more light on that.
Well, what ARC Alliance provides now is the first is the NAN. The NAN is like the prefix that represents your institution. So they have a unique record registry for those NANs, and they do that. And there also runs the global resolver, but you don't need actually the global resolver in order to keep resolving the ARCs because the architecture of the network, you need to implement your own resolver. So if tomorrow, even if tomorrow, ARC Alliance disappeared, we have a resolver that we are already publishing. And regarding the data, as part of our service, public logs about what happens in the blockchain exist, and we have a more friendly version of the logs. So you can even download every day the transactions or the information about. So it's easy to duplicate if for some reason even the DARC network, the entire network falls. You can recreate that and keep providing the service even with other technology. I don't know if this answers your question because I see your face and.
I think we're slightly talking against each other, so perhaps we should discuss this later. But,
okay.
But I'm a little concerned that there isn't any formal arrangement for guaranteeing these relationships, for persisting these relationships. It seems like that's something that's missing in the ecosystem.
So just a quick comment, Omo. I mean, I really appreciated hearing more about this work. It's really outstanding. I do think that there are opportunities. These services that are built on these persistent identifier graphs should not exclude any of the persistent identifiers that are available. So for example, Make Data Count uses accession numbers, and so that should hopefully allow, a diversity of PIDs to be identified and those assertions between objects possible to surface. And so if there's I'm not in a position where I can say, oh, here's what we should do, but I am in a position to say, I'd be happy to help have that conversation. And, if there is a way to ingest that information and make it part of, because they're actually seeking more of this information, at least for Make Data Count. So I don't, if that's of interest, I'd be happy to be part of trying to make those conversations happen and advocate for this, because it's important. It's not just about, I think so many times we talk about, equitable access to research. It's about, I think we come at this in a very biased way from, where I work, where we think about like, oh, people should have access to our research. And what I say on my campus is there's a lot of great stuff happening that we can never find. Like, we don't understand all of the great science that we're missing because there's no way to find it. So, I'm very motivated to try and, if it's of interest.
So maybe if you don't mind, let's take some more questions, Peter.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to say that I think the key issue that our community is facing in regards to the sort of proliferation of the DOI system is that DOIs in particularly serve, whether we like the cost or not, but they serve as a way of getting people away from repositories to the publisher's systems in the vast majority of cases, where basically the DOI is displayed in the repository and then just redirects actually to the publisher's system, effectively driving traffic away from repositories. And I think that's not in the interest of our community. I also would like to say that I had a presentation in the Open Repositories 2022 about another system called OAI, and in fact, so we consider at this point that any good repository will have an OAI PMH interface. And anything that has an OAI PMH interface already means another type of an identifier called an OAI identifier, for which we also have resolvers, and we also have a free system of resolving to these OAI identifiers. There are other systems as well. There's, for instance, Handle. So there's a range of identifiers beyond the DOI. And what I would like to see particularly, and I think that would be really good for our community, when we talk about open access, when we advocate for open access policies, and we see DOIs being enforced by these agencies, we should always say, hey, we don't want to see that. We want to see that there is I think we all have an agreement that there should be an identifier for the records, but I think we want to have, there's no problem in multiple identifiers working in an ecosystem. What we absolutely do want, though, is that these identifiers are resolvable not to the publishers, but to the repositories.
Thank you. I saw your presentation, and I need to say that we are using also the OAI PMH identifier associated with the DARC, and it's a secondary identifier, and even we are using this in the internal system to pair the repository record with during the mining process. But the problem that we have at least in Latin America with the OAI PMH identifier is that it's not being used, so be very careful. So if it's in this space at least, it's associated to the DNS name, and when they change something in the system, so the OAI PMH identifier is changing. It's completely wrong use of the system, but I know that, but it's happened. Only that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Roman, please.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking in two directions. One, also address a little bit what Paul said and also what we have discussed yesterday evening. So my first impression when I heard about this was, yes, let's try to do it. Let's try to do it to make sense, because it's not that heavy infrastructure what you have to run. And if you are in a position that you already run infrastructure, you have a sys administrator in place and you can easily implement it. So that's not the big deal. But I also think now we are getting more and more alternatives to the DOI. So we also now run a health server. We are using DOI. Then we run doc, and then how many make sense? So we as a community also have to make a decision or think about which would be the alternative we would like to go on. And I think this addresses also a little bit what Paul said, that you need also not only the technology behind, you need also the community behind and say, okay, we want to go in this direction. Because this is one of the strengths why why DOI works. This is the community of the publishers. They are behind. So I think we should also think in this direction.
Maybe that's why I ask, what's wrong with this community? Because we seem to have...
But I think that's exactly Ramon's point, that there are communities behind.
we should, as a community, decide which way to go, because there's an alternative, there's an alternative, and there's an alternative. But we should decide as a community and then go in this way. Maybe this is the best solution. I have no idea, because I heard yesterday the first time about it. But it's one good way. So nothing against this way.
What I meant was, what's wrong with this community being responsible for that? Like COAR as a Confederation of Open Access Repositories, considering we have repositories, we have the need. So why don't we ask the community start to actually explore this or take it forward, and in the same way provide the sort of guarantees that Paul was requesting?
Could we have?
Yeah, so I think that's what we're trying to do now, is start a conversation about it. I also don't know the pros and cons of the different options, Raman, but I trust very much Lautaro and Omo, who have looked at the ecosystem closely. And I think the problem is there's a very strong narrative that we have to fight, which is the narrative of the publishers and that DOIs are necessary if you want to be considered, your publication to be considered legitimate. So I think what I see is an opportunity, because there are certain regions in the world that just cannot do the DOI, and they are, they're basically developing, I think, in a very good way, solutions that are interoperable across Latin America and Africa, and maybe potentially India, because I know there's the same issue, Davika, in India. And so I think, this is the beginning of the conversation, and those of us in the global north should take a look at what's happening and potentially reassess our commitment to the DOI, the DOI gods.
Thanks a lot. Any other questions to any of the speakers? Kristi, Paolo, Lautaro, Omo? Any questions? Petr, please.
So I have a question for Paolo. I was really wondering, what argument did you use with Springer, with Elsevier, and so on, in order for them to allow you to get the PDFs so that you could process them? Because I tried and I failed miserably.
Natalia is really good at convincing. No, of course, these behave in different ways, and they took it as different opportunities. For example, Springer was really interested in mining for Springer Nature, so that was the whole thing, for accession numbers, which is something that we do, okay? And they have it also on their site, so they wanted to counter-check what would be the added value, okay? And so the idea is, okay, we can do, you give us your stuff, but in exchange, we can also mine for other things, we can use the data. Of course, we cannot redistribute anything, so these are, some of these are closed access, some are not. Elsevier, actually ACM was free, so no problem at all. So we had the discussion and it was fine, and they gave us everything. Taylor and Francis the same, they gave us the open access part plus something that is closed, and they wanted in exchange links to projects, links to stuff, which we publicly anyway share, so that's fine. That's the agreement that we have. So if we do it, we don't do it for you, okay? That's, with Elsevier, completely different things. So Elsevier, for example, they gave us only the open access, purely open access core subset, which is useful because we don't have to crawl for them.
Apologies, just a quick question about Elsevier. So when you say open access subset, do you mean the Creative Commons or also the bronze? Because this is different.
Also the
bronze. Effectively, Elsevier has a large subset of content, which actually is, it's open access, it's free to read on their website, but it's actually not a CC license.
Yes. Look, I'm not sure. I should read the contract again, because of course we have contracts and agreements with them. I'm telling you that it's a very little set. I think it's 100,000 papers. So it's severe was in this sense, and they actually, the people I talked to actually apologized because I mean, we want to, but by policy we cannot do it because it's our business model, okay? And it was also less flexible from the point of view of sharing what we could take out of it. It was very specific to projects. In fact, they take everything from us in terms of links to data, links to projects that we are collecting or inferring. They take it because they use it for their own statistics and SciVAD and so on. But for this specific part they gave us, we're only allowed to mine for this part. That was the idea.
But all of these agreements are free agreements. You don't have to pay for them, right?
No,
no,
we don't pay to publishers. No, the kind of subscriptions that we have are the ones that let us access data like ORCID. We are ORCID members, or Crossref. We are Crossref members. That's it. We don't go beyond that. It's by default the case. And in general, when we offer a service, we offer it for free to those who can not afford it, and we try to charge where necessary those that can afford it. Okay, so that's the idea.
Thank you so much, everyone. Let's give another round of applause to our excellent speakers today. I think we have a lot of topics to discuss over coffee. We have